What's up, Internet? I thought I would do sort of a final League start progress video for this build. We're like 2 weeks in now to Metamorph, I want to say. And for the most part, progression is just kind of done with the old Freezing Pulse totems character. The state of our Atlas is basically done. It's not fully done, as you can see. We've got 142 out of 154, which means we have like 10 unique maps, and then I've got like Sepulture and Vol Temple I just never found. I might have found Sepulture and just never ran it. It's kind of a joke with me. I can't stand this map. But otherwise, we've cleared out everything. We're at 83 Awakened bonus, so there's still a bunch of maps like this one that we haven't run. I haven't run the high tier version of this map since hitting Awaken level 8, right? Or since I've fully socketed this area. So we still have some of these maps to clear out. But the Awaken level is max, and this is the real juice, right? Like, this is the real reason you want to progress your Atlas. This feels like it makes your mapping so much more profitable, and it's what makes the grind for these watchstones really worthwhile. The chances to get all this extra stuff, in particular, the Shaper and Elder and Synthesis maps drop way more at Awakening 8 than they did before. And they're worth a lot, right? Shaper frags, Elder frags, the drops from Synthesis. Sometimes just the synth maps themselves have crazy bonuses, so the other thing too is it increases the drops of the Conquerors and Sirus himself in particular. So this should be one of your primary goals, like getting this up to Awakening level 8, provided you can handle the whole Atlas at red tier. It just makes everything so much more profitable that this is what you gotta do, right? One thing I wanted to mention before I forget, as you can see here, it's still the case that when a Conqueror has influence over a region, the Watchstone altar is gone, right? They said that they changed this, but it didn't work. And there's one thing that people never mentioned to me that I found really annoying. If you have one of these consumable Watchstones in the altar for that region, and then the Conqueror comes and puts influence on it, right? So I have a consumable Watchstone in there somewhere, and it only had, let's say, 5 charges left by the time he shows up. And then I run 5 more maps, but it's not enough to find him in his citadel, right? What'll happen is that the Watchstone will actually expire in the hidden altar, and it'll knock your Awakening level down to 7, because this region no longer has 4 Watchstones in it. Which totally screws you up, because the influence stays, but you can't get it back to Awakening level 8. The whole region drops. This was really obnoxious, and until they actually fix it to where the altars stay visible until the citadel is at least there, I don't recommend that you use those consumable Watchstones, because they're inevitably going to fix it to the way that they wanted it to work. But anyway, gear wise, we still have some upgrades left, but we've really hit a lot of them this league. I don't have a ton of currency at the moment because I just bought all of my Awakened gems not that long ago, which are leveling incredibly slowly, by the way. It feels like I might stop playing this character by the time they're anywhere close to level 5. But since the last video, those gems and probably like these boots are the only significant upgrades I've gotten. I bought this. This was originally just a temple mod. I really like Zopex. It's a big flat mana plus a gigantic increased max mana roll, which is good for us not just for mana but for damage through things like Transfiguration of Mind. And then I ran Uberlab to get the damage penetrates 10% of resistances, which is by far our best lab enchant. That is worth like 7 or 8% damage just on its own or something like that. And I decided to slam this with a Redeemer Orb to what I really wanted was the up to 40% increased effect of non-damaging ailments. So up to like 40% increased effect of chill and freeze. But there were 3 out of 4 in the Redeemer suffix pool that were pretty good here. There was only one that I wouldn't have been able to use, which is the Onslaught on kill. And we just wound up hitting tier 3 chance to dodge attack hits, which is fine. It's basically like a double temple modded boot now. I rolled attack dodge and I got Zopex, so it's still a pretty sick pair of boots. We could still probably upgrade the gloves at this point. We could definitely upgrade the amulet to get +1 cold, or if we really splashed money, we could get +1 cold and +1 int. Keep the life roll, still get crit multi and cast speed. You can make a really fat amulet this league, and I haven't really gotten there yet. And we haven't really upgraded our helm. I do have a 30% base that I just haven't really been able to land anything decent with my fossil crafting yet. But ideally we have the -9 cold res aura here, and on top of the 30% proj speed instead of 20%. But even with all that stuff, you know, not active, between our Watcher's Eye and everything, you know, we still have like 450-ish tooltip DPS. I want to say in Path of Building right now I'm at like 850,000 Shaper DPS per totem with my flasks up, which has proven to just be way more than I need, right? Like, we're already at the point where everything's overkill, which it shouldn't be surprising, right? Like, I can't imagine there's less than 50 exalts invested in the character at this point, largely because these awakening gems weren't very cheap. But we still, you know, we have a reflection and a Coward's Legacy and some expensive pieces here. The wand and the boots would certainly not be cheap. But yeah, that's just this feels like a good cap point. We've killed the Awakener a few times at Awakening level 8. Last couple times he hasn't killed me, and I feel like I have a pretty good understanding of the fight. The Atlas is done. We still haven't found all. I don't know, it feels like we're never going to find that guy. But at this point, any of the upgrades I get are going to be really superfluous, right? Corrupting the Soul Mantle for +2 proj, or +1 all, or something like that. Getting like this could be a Warlord's Ring, I guess, where the evasion rating would have been better as like crit multi or something like that. But it's all kind of unnecessary, right? We've hit the threshold where we're way over what we need to do anything in the game. So instead of running a map, I think this time what I want to do is go over the last Awakener kill that I did on this character and just kind of talk about the fight. For those of you who haven't been able to get it down with Freezing Pulse, or any other build for that matter, right? You're still working on this encounter. Because I feel like it's very much a control fight. It's not a kind of fight where you're concerned about your having so much DPS or something like that. There's no enrage. There's not really a mechanic that's forcing you to hit a certain level of DPS. It's really just about knowing what you gotta dodge and how to dodge it, and then how to manipulate the storms, which is really the bulk of the encounter. And this was the last attempt that went really well. The start of the fight, it doesn't really matter which way you go. I typically run out through the south, but it really doesn't matter. Just make sure you don't run into his first attack and jump in and get underneath him right here. In his first phase, nothing really goes on, right? Your job is just to put totems down and curse him and run in a circle. He'll teleport. He'll do a weak version of Pentabeam. He'll do his little auto attack, but the safest place in this encounter, and this is true for all the phases, the safest place is right next to him, because he has to track you to hit you with anything. He's not like Uber Elder or Shaper where they have melee attacks that have a cone, where as a caster you might not necessarily want to be next to them because you could take a fat melee hit or something. He doesn't have anything like that. So just even during the last phase, your job is basically to get on top of him and run in a circle so that he can't hit you with his tracking attacks. So the first phase happens, and as you'll see here, I typically come down here to the south, like the southeast from him, and you don't want to get too far from him, because you notice how you see that storm forming up there. If you run too far away, what'll happen is he won't finish the script, and he'll just sit there and wait. And you'll have to run back into his range and actually watch the storm finish forming. But I just typically wait down here, and this is the first example of moving a storm. The first storm here, I think, is the easiest to manage. And I kind of pull it in a direction I think would spook people, like scare people, because people are very paranoid about getting a storm anywhere near the entrance. But once you learn how to move these storms, I feel like the fight loses a lot of its mystery and fear. And so I just run up here and I grab a hold of it, and I start pulling it in this direction. And you'll notice that after I get its attention, I move out of its range. And this is kind of important. Once you start getting a feel for the way storms track and their momentum, it's important to understand that, like, when you're close enough to where you see the red sparks attached to your character, you're like pulling on it, and it sees you and it starts tracking you. But once you're out of its range, it only has sort of a sense of your last direction. And so I'm getting away from it so that I know that it's going to start moving in that last direction. And then I move perpendicularly to it like this while I'm still outside of its tracking range. You notice that I cut right through this storm because I know this storm's not going anywhere. This was here at the start of the encounter. I don't care what happens to this. I just want to make sure that this one does not pick up my scent, so to speak, right? I don't want to link back up to this. And once I do that, it's stuck with all that momentum in the direction that I pulled it originally, right? And I can just walk around it now and get to the other side. Now, every time that you get underneath him and start a new phase, he pushes, this storm's still off traveling, but he clears the arena, like this little ring that comes up. You can see like right here, a little bit hard to see there. If there's any storms within that ring at the start of the encounter, he'll push them directly out, away from him. So you don't really have to worry if one of the storms is too close. The only thing to bear in mind is that if a storm is too close to him, like directly underneath him, he will not phase. There has to be like a little bit of a gap between the storm and his position when you run underneath him before he'll decide to come down. So don't try to force it too hard is what I'm saying. If there's a storm way too close and you think, well, I can take the degen for a second and phase him, he just won't phase. You'll just get yourself killed. So in the second phase, almost nothing changes, right? The only thing that's going to happen is he's going to get one new attack. Well, actually, he's going to get two new attacks. He's going to get the bowling alley, as I call it, where he puts up two walls to the left and the right. And there's actually two ways to deal with this. The first is to run directly through him and just get out, which is what I do here. The other, if you are feeling particularly bold or you want to do this conditional challenge, you want to back up in the other direction up there. Sirus, it's hard to tell, but he actually throws those orbs both left and right, and he kind of leans his body into whatever side he's about to throw. And you have just enough room to sidestep to the left or to the right every time he throws one of those. They do a fair amount of damage. You can easily do this if you're on something like a minion necromancer who has a bunch of skeletons and zombies. They'll just tank those things for you, and you don't have to move. And it doesn't count for breaking this condition. So that's a pretty easy way to cheese it. It's not, you can't really do it with totems because you can't summon them back fast enough unless you are, maybe if you're using multiple totems or something and you had 6. But it didn't seem to stop them. It didn't seem to work for me. So I just cut out here. The fight's easy enough in the damage phases that I'm not worried about trying to squeeze DPS out of the bowling alley phase. This is the other new attack. He gets a little meteor. You've probably seen this one. He just drops a wall directly around you. He'll teleport you into the middle of this attack every time, and you're just looking for these red sparks. As this attack upgrades through the next 2 phases, he'll add another layer of wall, but it's the same way. You're just looking for the red sparks, and you just run out. You'll also notice that the meteor always comes down like right after you get out, and it kind of makes you feel like you don't know if you just got out in time or not. I've literally never had one of these meteors come down on my head. And I've had, actually in this video you'll see I really screw up in the 3rd phase and take like a completely wrong end around path, and I still get out in time. I think they just made it to where the meteor, there's probably a set amount of time where it will come down on your head and kill you, but like the meteor always comes down right after you get out. So it just kind of feels like whoa, I just got out of there in time, but it's really just an illusion. Otherwise, this phase is just like the last phase. You're just staying on top of him, avoiding that beam. Be careful with that attack you just saw. Let's back it up actually a little bit. This here, where he drops these 5 little points, the projection is the one that does that. This is the attack that leaves the degen on the ground. It's a little hard to see because my freezing pulse totems are so... This video is not like the highest res thing. But the degen pools on the ground are incredibly nasty. They're not just, this is some damage on the ground. They do insane damage over time. They lower your resistance to all forms of damage, and they set your global recovery to 0. So if you're standing in it, you can't recover anything of any shape. You can't recover mana or life or ES. You hit your flasks, they'll do nothing. You have to not be in them. They are incredibly dangerous. You can kind of run through one for a second, and it won't just outright kill you, but it's real easy to stand in one for like half a second and get way behind in terms of your regen and get ganked by a follow-up attack or something. So, same things before. As you can see, I don't really get too far away because I don't want him to... I want him to actually finish this attack. With this one, I just run over here to this little tent. And as you see, I wait for him. He has like a set pattern of pathing. Whenever he can't see you, he'll start moving on this patrol path. And he comes down to the southwest here. And then right around here, he'll take a turn to the northwest. Towards the stairs, right? And that the stairs are like the last place you want to fight the last phase. Your job in managing the storms in the arena is to not fight that asshole by the stairs. Because it's totally screwed up. You've probably heard all kinds of people complaining about it. The rails on the staircase can't be walked over. And so whenever he does the meteor attack, if it's on the stairs, it can actually trap you and get you killed. You don't want to be there. And your job is to like basically get to the last phase before he passes up there. We have a little bit of room here though for the second phase to where we can just stand here and wait for him to come to us. You can see his shadow creeping over to us faster than the storm he put down. And so I can just come over here and trigger him. Now, it is possible when he puts that second storm down and you're not around for the storm to find you, it'll pick a random direction, I think, and start patrolling. The storms patrol like that much slower than when they have your attention. Like if they link to you and they see you, they pick up a lot of speed. But when they're just patrolling like that, they're quite slow. However, it can still be to where the storm will spawn and pick that same direction as he's traveling, which is really obnoxious because he's a little bit faster than the storm, but not by much. And you have to wait a much longer period of time. One thing you can do if that happens is cut up to the north and basically go around this storm here that was already here when the fight started. Just go around it and pull this storm from the back and pull it back into that corner. This will open up the middle for you again. It'll also help keep Sirus sort of in the middle because whenever he sees you and he wants to try and hit you with like obliteration or the meteor attack, he doesn't patrol. So he's not going to creep closer up towards the staircase. But typically, I just run over to the left and wait there for him. And 9 times out of 10, the storm will just wander off somewhere. We don't care where it goes. In this phase, still nothing's changing, right? It's basically exactly like before. The only thing that really changes here is the meteor attack is going to get the second wall. As you can see, the meteor comes down right as you get out, but it's just like it's an illusion. You have all kinds of time to just walk out of there. And it was a very short phase. So for this last phase, this last storm phase, this was the strategy that I used to use, and after this kill, I've sort of changed my thinking on it. Typically what I would do is I'd wait for the storm to spawn and I'd come wait for him up here because I would just bank on that storm not wandering to the north and I just wait it out. Now you'll remember the storm from the last phase didn't patrol to the left. It actually wandered up here and I can't see it because it's actually overlapping the storm that was already here. And so I come up here to wait for him, and I don't realize that that storm from the second phase is actually the one I'm looking at. And so I'm like, okay. And I pull it over here to the left, and just like the very first storm, I move perpendicularly to it. I don't even flame dash on this one, but I'm out of his vision at this point, right? Once I saw that it was attached to me, I just moved perpendicularly to it without getting back into its tracking range. But now I have to go around the top like I was just talking about. And this storm is still here. And I shouldn't have flame dashed here, but it's not a big deal. Because we still bought all this room, you just pull it out from underneath him, right? And we'll wait, make sure it's got this momentum, right? And now I'm going to go around it. And I'm just not going to get back into its tracking range. Once you get comfortable with that distance where you get its attention, you take a few steps away from it, you know, and move outside the radius, it becomes a lot more, I don't know, comfortable, I guess, dealing with this encounter. And this is the last phase, and this is where you want to fight the last phase, and why I think in general when I get to that final phase anymore, I'm probably going to approach it like I just did here, on the fly, trying to, you know, not die. But it seems like a much more reliable set of pattern here, just going around the top, pulling that last storm from the bottom to the right. That way he keeps you keep your attention, you keep his attention instead of letting him patrol up to the northwest, and you should always get your last phase right here in the middle, which is great because you don't want to deal with the meteor attack on the stairs. This is really where the fight starts. Like, this is the only phase in the fight where you have a chance of dying, I think. Now, a few new things happen here, right? He still has his normal auto attack. This is the first new attack, Everlasting Fire. And he sets this up every phase up until the next meteor. And as you can see here, he puts 3 more clones, but you can still see him, right? If you have Life Burst turned on, you'll still see his life bar. But he's actually a different color than the other ones too, which is really important because you can actually hit him during this. And DPS uptime is really important for shortening this last phase and having to dodge a lot less stuff. When he does this attack, all 4 clones shoot into the center, and what will happen is after a second they'll explode, and I'm actually a little bit too close here, and I wind up taking the detonation. Either that or like the beams are desynced on the client. I can't tell which, because it said I got hit by spinning negation beams, even though they are clearly I'm exactly in the middle of 2 of them, so I don't exactly know what happened there. I'm pretty sure it's just that I was too close to the... When this thing spawns, when this beam thing initially spawns, there's a radius where it does damage. I think that's what I got hit by. After he does this, these beams rotate around, and they're actually not that threatening. If we actually alt-tab back into the game for a second, one thing I run for this fight is the Soul of Arakali and the Prophecy. Upgraded both Queen of the Great Tangle and Thraxia. Both of those are really important. All 3 of these bonuses are amazing for this fight. The 50% increased recovery rate of life if you stop taking damage over time recently triggers all the time in this encounter. Every time you run through a spinning beam, every time you run over the ground degen, every time you run out of a storm's radius after it's been degenning you, that triggers. You also get 5% reduced damage taken from damage over time, and then another 25% chaos resistance against damage over time, which are the storms, the spinning beams, and I'm pretty sure the ground degen. So this is like an amazing pantheon for this fight. You might be scared of not running Brine King, but the truth of the matter is, this isn't stun immunity. This is stun protection. This is going to help you not get re-stunned, and the problem is, if you get hit by Pentabeam, which is the only attack that's going to put you at risk if it stuns you, you're going to die before you get out of that stun anyway. You can't get hit by Pentabeam, at least in my build. This is not a build where we're built for tanking Pentabeam, so it doesn't matter whether we're going to get stunned more than once. If we get stunned once, the follow-up beam, which will hit you before that stun wears off, has already killed you. Your job is not to get hit by Pentabeam. That's the only way you're You're gonna survive. So anyway, the spinning beams get set up and he's standing there, right? He'll teleport pretty frequently in this phase, and it's much more dangerous when he teleports to normal, because anytime you can't see him, you are relying completely on your ears to know what he's about to do. And whenever you're relying on your ears, you have to be really sharp, because one of his tells, he just says the word die. And every time he says the word die, he's about to do Pentabeam, which is instant death, right? When he says you will long for non-existence, it usually means he's setting up what I typically call the ballerinas. And I just barely, I heard it, but I didn't feel like I could get up here to see where the ring of clones were. I'll have to wait until he does that attack again to give you a better idea of it. But after he's done that ring, he'll usually sit here for a few attacks. Sometimes he'll do one teleport. But your job, again, once you're out of threat of Pentabeam, your job is to get on top of him. Because now, if you're just sitting here running around in circles, he can't track you properly. And there is where he did Pentabeam, just out in the open, where he says die. If I had been far away from him, that might have killed me. Because if I'm like way over here, and he does Pentabeam from here, if I can only get this far in maybe 1 second, that's not too much of an angle change for him, right? The difference between this and this. Whereas if I'm right next to him and he says die, 1 second of travel now basically gets me 90 degrees around him. He's never going to hit me. So you want to be right on top of him. That's the safest place in the world. Just keep an eye out for the degen, so you're not like running through death. But for the most part, you just want to be right on top of him. This beam is so dangerous, by the way, because it's I call it Pentabeam because it's 5 shots in the last phase of just absolute death. It cycles through every damage type per beam. It basically cycles through fire. So I think it starts at physical. Maybe it starts at a random point. I'm not really sure. They all kill me pretty much. But it's like physical, fire, cold, lightning, and chaos. And each one has a guaranteed ailment application on top of that. So if he hits you with the ice beam, you're frozen. Or if he hits you with the fire beam, you get like a fat ignite. Or if he hits you with the physical beam, you actually get a 10 stack of corrupted blood. Of like just disgusting corrupted blood. So getting hit by this, the first one's going to hit you and stun you, and the rest of them, like just the second follow-up is going to be enough to kill you. Because whatever the ailment the first one put on is usually going to do a shitload of damage anyway. So don't get hit by Pentabeam, basically. Here's the meteor attack in the last phase. It's just like the others. As you can see, this was the one where I came out to the right. The exit was actually right to my, just to the left. You can see it right hidden behind my Quicksilver adrenaline flask thing. And I came out this way instead. And as you can see, I still have plenty of time to get out. It's just not really a big deal. There he hit me once on the way out for the bowling alley. And it's not really that big of a deal. You can take like 1 or maybe 2 of those as long as you have steel skin, not on cooldown. But just get out of there as soon as you can. Another reason why staying on top of him is so useful. And I think he doesn't even get to live through this everlasting fire before he dies. So yeah, that's the whole fight. This fight is basically 99% dealing with the arena and then dodging Pentabeam. If you can do these 2 things, you can kill this fight on any awakening level. Because everything else you're dealing with is basically trivial. Learning the storms, I think, was probably the biggest challenge for me. Just going into the fight blind, like I didn't want to watch other people's videos and stuff. I wanted to get in there and learn it for myself. And it took, he kicked my ass for like 3 sets of portals until I got a better sense of how to manipulate the storms and their momentum and their turn rate, I guess. But yeah, that was my last kill. It seems like that strategy is pretty consistent. Like I said, I'm probably going to start taking that very last phase the way it happened in this video, where I went around the top just to make things more consistent and fight him in the middle of the arena. But yeah, I think this is going to wrap up the League Start Progress series for this league. At this point, we're just going to be farming for profit and thinking about our next build. I'm still going to be streaming. I've been a little bit busier than I thought for the Christmas period here, but I'll probably be streaming this weekend, and I'm going to start setting a schedule, probably 3 days a week at least. I haven't decided. I'm going to decide this weekend, and I'm thinking it's going to be something like Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for like 8 hours or something like that. You can catch me at twitch.tv/WallachTV, and I'll also put a link to the Discord if you want to get notified when I go online, or you just want to talk to some other people who are playing Totems this league. So yeah, I'm going to go make some tea and probably start thinking about my next build. And I will see you guys next video. Peace.